Right, so arms in virtual reality are particularly good. We're going to be doing a tutorial on how to do the good ones, how to make them better. But before that, I'm going to go over why they're not very good and how to make them better. And then we're gonna learn you something about how to make them better. Okay, so this is how arms are at the moment, and they're not very good. These are slightly, normally the point would be further out, I couldn't be bothered, so these look worse than they would normally, but same issues still apply. Hence back here, the little white orb, that's where the elbow is pointing to. You'll notice what keeps happening is, one, I can like that, right? Which, in a lot of games, what they'll do is they'll just stop you from moving your hand point. I think that's a bit silly. Because if your hand's in that position, aside from physics stuff, physics isn't stopping you from doing that. It's the game's arms not being long enough. Alright? Aside from that, the main issue with this is if I go to punch someone, right? Or that's terrible, right? No matter which way I move my hands, the point that these elbows are going to be pointing at is always the same. So when I go to do other movements that aren't just like standing here, right, or doing that, when I go to do anything else, it looks and it feels terrible from your perspective and from my perspective. The solution to that would be to give you more control over where the elbows are. Have, the hint be a child to the controller, right? And then when I go to punch, it's in line. It gives you that sense of power, right? Except this is also terrible, because you can do that. It doesn't... The other one prevented the arms from being in impossible angles, but it restricts control. This gives you control, but now the arms are in horrible angles. Our solution is to merge those, not actually merge them, but the solution is this. It is the same as before, with the hint as a child of the hand, except we lock that hint into the elbow's axis. So it acts like a hinge joint, which it still has some limitations, right? It can get funky. But for the most part, if I'm boom, it works. And it works a lot more consistently than the other two. And when you are doing something, that's just having that there, just that connection in your head where your real arm is, where that is, and more just being able to see the way power is transferred, infinitely better for a lot of things. More than just looking natural, it feels good to do movements. Movements feel more impactful. They feel more... You have more presence in the world, right? More than that, though, let's say you have like a horror game or something, and you're here with your pistol, and you're walking around and you're going, ooh, right? That's nice. That's nice to be able to do. Imagine that's not, yeah? That is. So the way we get to that point is, like I said, is take the hint, child of the hand, over here where the elbow will be, but you lock it to the elbow's axis. So how do we get the elbow's axis? So in order to estimate the axis of the elbow, what we do is, if you'll put your palm out in front of you for a moment, you'll find that with a little bit of leeway, generally, if your palm's straight up, your elbow's straight up. Palm 90 degrees, elbow 45 degrees. Palm 180 degrees, elbow 90 degrees. Palm 270 degrees, elbow 135 degrees. What we can do with that, boil that down into some rules and turn that into code. Which all that essentially is from this starting kind of up position. If this was 0 degrees, and then 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, 270. If this is 0 degrees, and you rotate around from there, all the elbow's doing is following that palm's rotation at about half, right? And that is something that we can very easily replicate, which I've done right here. But in order to do that, we need to have the IK arms to start with. And I'm not very smart. So we are going to have these guys be smart for us. VITRIOL Games Fast IK. There's the link also in the description. It is a free Unity store package or asset package thing. There's a couple scripts in there, but we only need one. Very easy to set up. I'll go over that briefly, and then how we, duct tape our extra, restriction script on top. And that's it. In terms of the rest of it, like rotating the body, watch a tutorial. Because that's already been done. That's out there, even to the point of the IK arms, but just because it's so integral to this, I'll go over them very briefly. But this is more of an elbow tutorial, and in order to not have this be like 1.5 hours long, just go watch a tutorial on how to do like the rest of the upper body, which is just, positioning the torso, rotating the, that stuff. Other than that though, I mean, it's surprisingly accurate. Like, I don't think... No, I didn't make a thing to turn these off. Like... Oh! It's... I mean, you'd have to test it for yourself by watching the tutorial. But it is incredibly natural. It's just... It has some limitations, but for the most part, these limitations here, where it's going all weird, that's when it's outside your perspective. For the most part, from inside, your cone of vision, this thing's perfect, right? Not like, not like having trackers perfect, but, I mean, close enough. Okay, for our example, we're going to go through the left arm. You just duplicate that afterwards. So, first things first, you may have noticed before, but I forgot to talk about it. The shoulder can hyperextend, right? So it can just come forward a bit, which just gives you a little more breathing room. Because, I mean, in real life, your shoulder can come forward a bit. It just gives you a little more breathing, presence, that stuff. So we'll start with the IK arms. What you want? I do weird stuff. My visuals are separate from the IK thing. I attach it through different means because I have like physics arms and colliders and weird stuff. For our tutorial, we're just gonna go wrist. Wrist is just an empty game object. You'll want it to be, a child of whatever your, whatever your body rotate thing is. Essentially, chuck the script on an empty game object. Chain length 2. Forget about armref, armfollow. Those are lists that I added in. They won't be there for you. That is again because I do weird stuff that is unrelated. So your target is here. That'll be on your real physics hand or controller, however you're doing it. I have it on the physics hand. So that is where this wrist is going to teleport to. Then, second up, you're going to want the forearm. You want the origins of these, their pivot points, to be at the pivot points. Like, you want them to be at the joints, because when this guy bends, we're going to rotate around. The upper arm is going to be rotating around his pivot point, and the forearm is going to be bending down around his pivot point, right? And then the wrist is going to be teleported to wherever your real wrist is. And then the pole is where this elbow is going to point. Boom. That is, so the pole. The pole where our elbow is going to point is right here. It's this guy. And this guy has a script on him. He's just an empty game object. He has a script on him, and this script is helping us follow with the elbow restrictions. We're following this guy, which is the real hint, which is attached to the controller, right? So, you are going to want, you can forget about everything under accessories, right? All that stuff, forget about it. All this stuff, oh, I'm breaking it. All this stuff, forget about it. That stuff, forget about it. Don't worry about it. Late update, toggle elbows, that was stuff. That's separate stuff. All you need is elbow forward calc, and you can get rid of this too. That was just so I could swap between, the good versions and the bad versions and all that. Elbow forward calc, hint calc. In yours, they're just going to be one after the other in update, like that. So elbow forward calc is where we're going to estimate the elbow's position and rotation. And then hint calc is where we're going to be following. We're going to have the script, the transform the script is attached to. We're going to be following with the restrictions, that guy. Right. So, forgetting about everything under accessories and all this other late update stuff, and forgetting about that, right? All we want is elbow, okay, is what's here. First, upper arm. That is going to be this upper arm, so the second parent in your chain length, right? Because you want chain length to be 2. That's that guy. You will also want, in your chain length, wrist, forearm, upper arm, shoulder pause. You're going to want an empty parent above the upper arm. This is just like the shoulder, the real shoulder position, right? That doesn't need to be anything special, just as long as it's wherever the shoulder should be. That is just to make our upper arm, because to make it a bit easier to do the upper arm, because we can jet it forward like that. It just makes that whole calculation a little bit easier by having a parent where it really is. So, upper arm, this guy. Ref object, the real hint. Palm ref is on your controller or your physics hand, however you're doing it. It is just the outward from the palm. You want the forward coming out from the palm, right? And elbow ref, you'll want an empty game object, and you don't need the visual, but you will want the empty game object. Nothing special about the elbow reference, we're just going to use it as sort of a container for some information. So, we'll begin with elbow forward calc. First, you'll want the upper arm's local position to be vector 3.0. That is just for the stuff we do here, where we're going to be, hyperextending. Basically, we have the upper arm here, because upper arm is the thing that we're going to be moving in this bit, but for all our distance calculations and our directions, we're going to want to be using its parent, because that is the real shoulder position, right? We don't want this fake one used for like the visual of jutting out forward. We want the real shoulder position, which would be its parent. So the direction from this guy to this guy, split that into I do this as, you could have this be a local variable. I have it as a global because I do separate stuff with it for like calculating this thing, like the bicep moves. But for our purposes here, that could be a local variable. You want to get the direction between the upper arm parent, which is the shoulder. So you get the direction between the shoulder and the palm, split that into distance and direction. Then we get onto our rotations, right? So our base rotation, this default rotation here, is, like I was talking about before, it's a reference to our 0 degrees, right? Our 0 degrees when it's going directly up, right? Would be this, is quaternion look rotation, direction, vector 3 dot up. What it's doing is whatever this rotation is, as long as these guys, because they're both pointing the same direction now, so for the most part this is representative of this rotation here. Essentially the direction from the shoulder to the palm pointing straight up. That's our 0 angle, if you want to call it that, right? Then you get your elbow reference, using him just as a container for some information, because we are then going to need to use inverse transform point with him. So for now, we're going to set his rotation to our kind of our goal rotation, right? Which is the same thing as here, but instead of vector 3 dot up, we're using the palms forward. So it would be the same thing around this direction, around that direction from the shoulder to the palm, except we're pointing in that forward coming out of the palm. So here it's halfway between that up and that forward, which, 180 degrees, 90 degrees, 0 degrees, it's halfway. Because our palm forward pointing out there, right? You get it. Then local rotation, this is just the difference between this guy and this guy. Once we know the difference between there and there, which would be 180 degrees, right? With this guy all the way down, this guy all the way up, the difference is 180 degrees. That's kind of what this is. Because we get I'll use this one as a better example, we get the Z angle in Euler angles of our difference. So our difference around, it's our difference around this this forward, this angle between them. Our distance up here, our distance from that up, about 90 degrees. Divide it by 2, because here what it'll be is it'll be the palm, so it'll be like 180 degrees around that forward. Divide that by 2, add it back using rotate around that direction. We add back half of it just so it is, so it goes, if that's 0 degrees, that's 180 degrees, half, 90 degrees. So we're adding back half of that angle. And then here, all we're doing here is we're clamping it, right? Because angles are weird, we can't just do a normal clamp, we have to do weird angle stuff. Because we want it to rotate here, right? We want it to rotate anti-clockwise, but we don't want it to rotate clockwise, right? Rotate, rotate, boom. But we can't just clamp it, because here, what's happening is it'll be 0 degrees, 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 20 degrees, 10 degrees, 0 degrees, 350 degrees, and then stuff's weird. So we have to manually clamp it like this, which that is just adding back the angle to clamp it. That's all this stuff is. We have two of these because on one of these hands, which is the left arm, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, on the left arm, we're going to want to inverse it because this guy, right? We don't want him to rotate clockwise, but we want him to rotate anti-clockwise. But this guy, we want him to rotate clockwise, but we don't want him to rotate anti-clockwise. So we have to do that. Okay, all that clamp's really doing is making it so that it switches like that instead of doing so that we can have it rotate all the way around past what would be the like an inversion, which would be here where it would just like invert to the other side. So we can go past that, right, with those clamps. But on this side, so that's what I want there, but on this side for some reason, I don't know why, it just does it better and it just fully stops the rotation. I have no clue why, but you know, if you're smart, you can figure that out. I mean, it'll be something here, but I can't. I mean, it works how I want it to, so. Then, shoulder position. This is, like I was talking about, this is for that jutting out, that hyperextension, right? All we're doing, we did it up here, we got the local, we set the local position of the upper arm to vector 3.0. So this guy to that guy, pretty much. Then, just because of weird directional stuff and not wanting to deal with local positions and local directions, we set that local position to 0 and then we can just add the position on top of it. So what we're doing, we get the distance between our hint. So this guy, or our transform, our hint, we get the difference, we get the distance, the direction and the distance between our hint and our upper arm parent. So between the hint and the shoulder, we clamp it, right, to a max distance, but also we have this stuff here, right? Your 0 max distance, because of course we're going to be going in the direction, there. So you want to clamp it at 0. But the reason we do minus 0.28, you will have to calculate this for yourself, but essentially that minus 0.28, that is the distance between the shoulder and the hint at I forgot the word, hyperextension. So once your elbow has locked out, then it starts moving forward. Instead of just moving forward straight from there and then locking out, we want to lock out first and then move forward. That's all that is. If you get the distance between it, at hyperextension here, then you minus that distance between it off, and then it'll only jut forward at hyperextension. So for us, or for me, the point of hyperextension is 0.28 meters. And then make the elbow rest position halfway between the real shoulder, so the upper arm parent, and the hand, which is direction, shoulder to hand, times the distance, divided by 2. Right, so that's how we get our guy here to be halfway between the shoulder and the hand. And the reason we want him halfway between the shoulder and the hand is because down here we're also going to be locking those, not just the Y, but we're going to be locking these as well, locking the X and Z. So in hint calc, which it's just going to be forward and then hint, one after the other in update, without exactly like that. So forget about the shoulder blade stuff. That I think that was been turned off for a while. Don't worry about it. So hint, essentially, we get our reference object, which is our goal. Our reference object, our goal. get that in local position, like local to the elbow, right, with the inverse transform point. Then we one-way clamp it so you would clamp it to 0, but we do added limit, right? Because clamping the Y is how we prevent hyperextension, right? So when I do that and I move it up like that, he's staying below that Y, right? Because if we don't do it, right, and we like spaz out the added limit and we don't do it, then we get hyperextension. So you would make it 0, right? If it's, you'd lock it to 0, but zeros are weird, right? So we do a little more, and then it's a little more, there's a little more leeway, a little more how we like it. Then forget about snap trans, we'll do that in a sec. The local X and Z, you just want to add those back with a multiplier. So we're just dampering it by the 0.85, right? Because in real life, your elbow can't do that in real life, but you can mess around with your shoulder like that and your wrist, and you can, it gives it a little more freedom. Very little freedom, but just enough that it feels slightly more accurate. Then take that, turn it back into a world position, and then instead of just teleporting it to the position like here, we want to do it over time with these two, right? Get the step, position to goal position, times speed, times delta time. Then just move towards from our position to the goal position by that step. That's if it's not snap transform. If it is snap transform, which is only when we're hyperextending. So when we're hyperextending and we have to lock it, then snap transform is true, and we just teleport it to the goal. Reason for that being is it was so long, it was like a couple weeks ago now, I've completely forgotten. It was something to do with having it going from hyperextension to not hyperextension. There would be a delay. Or it might have been the other way around. It might have been going into hyperextension, it would like teleport up here and then move back and then teleport up here and then it was weird. So if it's, if we're having to lock that Y, we'll just snap it. And that is the entirety. That's everything. That is, now you have epic elbows. That's that.